Last week we were working on just like a basic review of the pin and the fork, and then we also reviewed the pawn end games that we've been covering so far, right? So I think we went over the rule of the square, and then we started looking at opposition, all right? So today we'll start off with, the basic. We'll just do a few puzzles, and then after that, we're gonna get into like more deeper into those pawn end games. All right. Okay. All right. So let me share my screen. All right. So let's actually start off with a few just mate in one puzzles. So all of these, it'll be checkmate in one move. All right. If you know the answer, you can just raise your hand. So this is black to play and checkmate in one move. Okay. Revanche.
Queen to e2.
Nice. Queen e2 checkmate. So the rook defends the queen, and the queen gives a check, and the king has nowhere to go, and there's no way to block, right? So that's checkmate. All right. What about here? This is actually it combines a bit about the pin. So let's just look here. This is white to play. Checkmate in one move. Okay. Viksha.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is this where we use two moves to make a checkmate, or is it all one?
This is just one move, so it's mate in one.
Um, okay.
Jacob. You're on mute.
So bishop to g8.
Okay. So Jacob says bishop g8. How about Vishnu?
Rook h6.
Okay, alright. So let's just take a quick look at these. So the problem with bishop to g8 is that first of all, it's not a check, right? So, and we're looking for a mate in one. And when it's mate in one, it always, every single time it has to be a check, right? Because it's checkmate. So see here, since bishop g8 is not a check, that's the reason it doesn't work, alright? So instead, we had rook h6, and this is the right move, alright? So you might be wondering, so let's just take a look really quick. So the rook is giving check to the king. Well, why can't the pawn take the rook? Does anybody see the reason? Isa?
Because then the queen will take the king.
Yeah, exactly. So basically what's happening here is you guys can see a pin, right? So in this case, this queen is pinning the pawn and the king from all the way on this side of the board. So if the pawn moves, then the black king is in danger behind it. So the pawn can't move. So that means that the pawn can't take our rook because then the black king would be under attack. So that means that there's no way to capture the rook, right? Now how about blocking the check? Can black put any piece on h7? No. So there's no way to block the check. And finally, can the king move anywhere? Can't go to h7, can't go to g7, and he can't go to g8 because of our bishop. Alright? So there's no way to capture, block, or move. That means that it's checkmate. Alright? Does anyone have any questions on this one? Jacob? You're on mute.
Is this stalemate?
No. So stalemate is when you can't, none of your opponent's pieces can move, but they're not in check. So in this case, since black is in check, this isn't stalemate. This is just regular checkmate.
Oh yeah, cause like it's checked because the rook.
Yeah.
The way. Yeah.
So if imagine that none of black's pieces could move, but he still wasn't in check, then that would be what stalemate is. All right, let's just do one more, and then we'll move on to the pin and fork. This is white to play, checkmate in one move. Okay, Adrian.
Queen to G6.
Alright, nice. Yeah, queen g6 checkmate. I think this one was pretty easy. So the pawn guards the queen, so the king can't. Or so the king can't take, and the king can't go here because of the queen, and he can't go to the back rank. He can't go to the g8 or h8 because our rook is guarding both those squares, right? Okay, so that I think you guys got that. So now let's go on. Let's do what we were doing before. So the fork and the pin. All right. So all of these tactics, they're gonna involve either using a combination of a fork and or a pin. Dave, do you have a question? No? Okay, alright. Alright, let's start with this. This is black to play, and I'll just give you a hint for this one. You have to use a pin. So think about how you can create a pin. Dave?
Rook to G8.
Alright, which rook? This rook or this rook?
The rook on the right.
Okay, so you're saying rook f g8.
Yeah.
Alright. How about revanche?
The rook on H8, H8 could
Okay.
go to the square.
Yeah, so you're also saying the other rook, basically, right?
Yeah.
Okay, alright. So let's just, this is actually an interesting one. What's the difference between rook fg8 and rook hg8? Because I think both of you guys have the same idea, alright? So let me just play a random move, okay? And then now let's look at it closely. Alright? So let's look here. Okay. So white just took this pawn on g5. Now I think you guys found the where the pin was, right? Basically, when you put one of your rooks here, then the knight can't move because the king behind it is in danger, right? So that is where the pin was. So that means next move, you could take the knight because right now it can't move. It's basically paralyzed, right? So now what's the difference? Rook fg8, rook hg8. So this is an important thing to what we're looking at, right? Creating a pin. So when we create a pin, it uh, basically paralyzes one of our opponent's pieces, right? And that's really useful. But, and in this specific case, this knight is also undefended, right? None of white's pieces are attacking this knight. So if this knight can't move and next move, and it's undefended, that means next move, black is going to take the knight, right? So let's say white played here. Then what would black play? Viksha?
You would kill the knight.
Exactly. It would just be rook takes knight, right? So that means that right now white has to find a way to defend this knight. Does anybody see a way to defend that knight? Okay, let's go Tabit.
Bishop to F4.
Okay, that's one possible way, but there's an even better way. Because if you go bishop to f4, then what's black gonna play? Revanche?
Pawn takes bishop on
Yeah, so the pawn will just take the bishop, right? So if we go bishop f4, the pawn takes. But is there anything else we can do? Dave?
pawn to F4.
Okay, yeah. So pawn to f4, right? So instead of bishop to f4, in this case, the pawn would just take back. And now white lost a full bishop, which is 3 points, and black didn't lose anything. And this pin is still here, and this knight is still undefended, right? So it looks like white's going to lose another piece after that too. So instead, pawn to f4. And now why is this different? So now, black can't take this knight, right? Because now what can white play? Vishnu?
White white pawn takes rook on G5.
Yeah, so this pawn will just take back our rook, right? Because by playing f4, this pawn defended this knight. So if we take, he's obviously just going to take back. So now that means temporarily black can't take this knight. So what does black do? Does anybody see what black would play here? Viksha?
The black pawn can kill the white pawn.
Yeah, so the black pawn is going to take the white pawn, right? Because we know we have a pin right now, okay? Now our opponent defended. When our opponent defends, but now we can take the defender, right? So we can capture the piece that's defending the knight. So now, okay, let's look at this position again. It's the same thing. Let's imagine white had no move. Let's just say he just played a random move like that. Now what would black play? Jacob?
So, oh, like, I actually don't. Oh,
Okay. How about Tabit?
The rook would take the knight.
Exactly. The rook would just take the knight, right? Because before, this pawn, by playing f4, white was defending the knight. And now we took away the defender, right? Our pawn took the defender. Now if white plays a different move, now we can just take the knight, right? The knight no longer is defended. But in this case, instead of rook to e1, that's not a very good move. What will black play here? Or sorry, what will white play here? Viksha?
The rook can kill the knight.
It's white to play, white to play.
Oh,
Okay, Jacob? You're on mute. Jacob, you're on mute. I can't hear you.
uh,
Yeah.
the what? The h2 bishop goes to for like the black pawn there.
Yeah, so the h2 bishop takes the pawn on f4, right? So now let me just flip the board back. So basically, this pawn took the bishop on h2 took the pawn. And now it's back to defending the knight, right? So you can see it kind of went back and forth. So originally, we attacked the knight and we gave a pin, right? And now our opponent, he defended. He defended the knight. And now we take the defender. So now the knight again has no defender, right? It's paralyzed and next move will take it. But back again, white will use his pawn to come and take this. Use his bishop to take our pawn. And now it's back to defend it. So it just went on and off, right, with that capture. But at the end you can see that this knight is still defended and we can't do anything because if we take, then black will just take back, alright? So there's no way we can do anything with that. So that means that that's the reason that moving rook f to g8, the rook on f8 moving to g8 doesn't work. But now why would the rook from h8 moving to g8 work? What's the difference, you might ask, alright? Let's look at that. So rook hg8. Now what's the only defending move for white again? So the one move white can use to defend the knight. Viksha?
pawn to f4.
Yeah, exactly, right? So the same, it's the white didn't make any changes. He still only has that one move to defend. He only can play f4. Now, what's the difference? Last time we took the pawn, and when he took back, it was defended. But this time, what if we take and black takes back? Now what can, and white takes back? Now what does black play? Dave?
The rook can take.
So you're saying the rook can take the bishop? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. So here in this case, the rook can take the bishop. So let's look at the difference, right? So look at this position. The rooks are on g8 and f8. And in this position, after here, the rooks are on h8 and g8, right? So the only difference is that the positioning of the rooks, right? The rooks, instead of the rooks being on g8 and h8, they are on f8 and g8. And because of that, this bishop is still under attack. So now the rook can take the bishop. Alright. So do you guys have any questions about that? Jacob?
So can you go back where like the pawn is, like the pawn on the white and and like three some like here or down the rook. No, like go back like that. So if the rook can capture the pawn and the bishop can capture the rook.
So, do you want to give me some notation, like what specific squares you're talking about?
Like 8f goes to 3f,
Yeah.
and then it captures it. The pawn, the f g5 knight, it goes to f3. It's still gonna capture the rook, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you're saying if this rook on f8, remember we said the letter before the number, so you gave the right notation, you just flip-flop the sequence. So the rook on f8, if you're saying if it takes the pawn on f3, right? So yeah, you're right. So the knight can still capture the rook. Because right now in this position, the knight is not in a pin, right? For there to be a pin, that means that there has to be like a rook here on g8 to do the pin, right? So since there's no rook here, that means that our rook if our rook captures f3, then the knight can still move, and he can take our rook back, alright? So yeah, does anyone else have any other questions about this? No? Okay, alright, so let's just go back here, and I'll play it out. Okay, so in this case, black didn't even take back the pawn, right? Instead, he just moved his king. So now what should black play here? Okay, Revanche.
The rook can take the knight
Exactly, the rook
on
can just,
f5.
yeah, on g5. So the rook can just take the knight, right? Because right now he has no defender after moving the king. Alright, I think that one tactic took a lot of time. So let's just go immediately into the endgames that we were looking at, alright? So I think what we did last week was we were looking at the rule of the square. We like reviewed the... Oh, what happened? I think it glitched out. Okay, alright, we were looking at the rule of the square, and then we were also looking at opposition, right? We started looking at opposition, alright? So in this class, we're just gonna continue going over opposition, right? And if you need any reminders about the rule of the square or how that works, you can always just go to that YouTube channel with the recordings. You can look over that, alright? But let me just refresh the page because it does not seem to be working. One second, let me stop sharing. Oh. Alright, so it looks like the classroom feature isn't working, so we'll just do this on the analysis board. So what we were doing last time was looking at the rule of the square, right? So, or the rule of the square and then opposition. So if you need a refresh on the rule of the square, go look at the YouTube channel, alright? But right now, we're gonna go over opposition really quick, and then we'll get into some examples, okay? So, does anybody remember what opposition was from last week? Isa?
When one piece, like the kings, are kind of racing to get to the end of the board, kind of.
Oh yeah, so that's the example I gave. But how about Viksha? What's the specific rule in opposition? Like, how does it happen?
So suppose when they meet each other and like they're in front of each other and the white king moves to his side, that's called an opposition.
Yeah, so basically, when the two kings they meet each other, basically. So yeah, they're directly opposite from one each other, right? And there's one square in between. So when this happens, then it's called opposition. And the reason is that is because they're opposing each other, kind of, alright? But before we go any further, Jacob, do you have a question?
No.
Okay, alright. Okay, so when the two kings meet each other, it's opposition. And why is this important? So that's where what Isa said, we were giving the example of a race. So just remember, in an actual game, the opposition isn't actually the like race of the kings. I was just giving that as an example. It'll instead be you'll have white will have a pawn, or maybe black has an extra pawn, and we'll use that to try and win the game. All right. But right now I'm just giving the example of opposition in a race. Okay. So when the two kings directly meet in front of each other, that means that they're guarding the same three squares in front of them, right? So both of these kings are guarding c5, d5, and e5, alright? So now it's black to play. That means that he can't move to any of these three squares in front, right? He can only move to the side, or he can move behind him. And I told you that so the blue squares are the only places he can move. The red squares, they're being guarded, right? And same thing with our king. Our king can't move forward either. The white king can only move to the side here or behind. But right now it's black to play, so we don't have to worry about that, right? So black to play. So where do you guys think the black king should move? Dave?
It should move to E6.
Okay, yeah, that's one possible square. Let's just say the king moves to e6, alright? Now, let's look at the squares that the kings are controlling again, alright? So before, over here, so both kings were guarding c5, d5, and e5. Alright, both kings. Now, when the king moves, now the white king, it's still guarding the same squares, right? c5, d5, and e5. It hasn't moved. But now, what are the squares that the black king is guarding in front of it? Jacob?
The black king is guarding is like the front and then sideways going down.
Yeah, so do you want to give the notation for that? Like the square notation?
Yeah. Like d5,
Yeah,
e5,
yeah.
and f5.
Nice, yeah, d5, e5, and f5. So you'll notice that this was different, right? In this case, the both kings were guarding c5, d5, and e5. But now, the white king guards this square of c5 extra, and the black king guards this square of f5 extra. So that means that they're no longer in opposition, right? Because opposition is only when they're directly across from each other. Now the black king moved to the side. So now, because the black king, it wasted a move, right? In a race, you're trying to get to the other side as quickly as possible. The black king wasted a move by moving to the side. But the white king, it can still move forward, right? The square on c5 is still open for the white king to go to. So now the white king goes there. And now, once we continue this, you'll notice that at the end, the white king got there in 7 moves, right? The white king only needed 7 moves to reach the other end of the board. But the black king, it needs 8 moves, right? So by using this opposition, white was able to quote unquote gain a move, right? He gained a move, and because of that, he was able to reach the other end of the board in 7 moves versus black reaching there in 8, okay? So does anybody have any questions on what opposition looks like? Jacob?
Can us opposition be sideways too? Like sideways?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question actually. So, you're saying if it's like this, right? Can the opposition be sideways? Yeah, okay. So,
Yes.
when we get more advanced, we'll learn about like different types of opposition. Right now we're just sticking with the basics, just opposition like this. But there is something called sideways opposition. There's also diagonal opposition, and there's something called distant opposition. These are all different types. But for now, all we're going to worry about is just a regular opposition, just up and down. All right, don't worry about the side to side or diagonal. So only when the two kings are like vertically aligned and with one square in between, that's the only type of opposition that we're worried about. Okay? So yeah, but that was a good question. Okay, so now I'm gonna give you guys a few examples of positions, and you guys have to tell me whether the two kings are in opposition or if they're not in opposition. Okay? So imagine that it's like this. Are the two kings in opposition? If you guys how about I'll just like go on like one by one and ask every single person, uh, so everyone gets a chance, right? So how about starting with Adrian? Are these two kings in opposition?
No.
All right, and why not?
Because they're like straight each other.
Yeah, so that's half right, but the main thing is when there's opposition, the two kings they have to be directly in front of each other. There's only one square in between. But here there is two squares in between, so that's why it's not opposition. Both kings
Oh,
can still
they're
be.
like facing together.
Yeah, so they're facing together, but there's two squares in between, so that's why this is not opposition. So yeah, you were right about that. Okay, next, Revanche, is this opposition?
No.
And why not?
Because the kings are not facing each other.
Yeah, basically, right? So the two kings are not directly in front of each other. They're like kind of broken apart. Okay, how about now? Jacob, is this opposition?
It's opposition.
Nice, yeah. So this is opposition, right? The two kings are directly in front of each other, and there's only one square in between. Okay, next, Dave. Um, is this opposition?
Yes.
Yeah, so same thing as before, right? It was just the same position. Two kings are directly in front of each other, and then there's only one square in between. Alright, now let me show you this. So it's like upside down, kind of, right? Now, Fiksha, is this opposition?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was just trying to
Why
trick
did
you.
I ask explanation? Why?
Yeah, so the reason why is basically uh so the two kings are still directly in front of each other with one square in between, right? So even though they're like flip-flopped, right? It looks like the white king should be on this side because that's closer to the white side and the black king should be on that side. This is still an example of opposition because neither of the kings can move forward, right? They have to move only back. All right? So yeah, that was an example of opposition. All right, how about uh this Vishnu, is this opposition?
No, they're not directly facing each other.
Yeah. So this is actually there's two different things wrong with it. So first of all, the two kings are sideways, right? They're not vertically aligned. So that means that there's no opposition there. But also the second thing is that there's two squares in between the two kings, right? Not just one. And so if the main rule of opposition is there can only be one square between the kings. If there's more than one square, it just doesn't work, all right? So in this case, the opposition is not there. Okay, and now, how about Isa? Is this opposition?
No,
All right, and why not?
because they aren't facing each other directly.
Yeah, basically, right? So the two kings aren't directly facing each other. They're kind of broken apart to the sides, all right? And did I miss anyone? Tabit? Um, okay, I don't. So Tabit, is this opposition?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? So two kings are directly in front of each other with just one square in between. So that's opposition. And Sudhir, is that your name?
Yeah.
Sudhir?
No, a conch.
Oh, Akanch. Okay. All right. We're I think you just joined, so you might not know what opposition is, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you can probably just like watch the recording for this class, and then should be able to figure it out. All right. So
Ah,
I'll just skip over you for now, because you probably don't know exactly what's happening right here. Okay.
okay.
So that's basically the extent of opposition, right? I think you guys mostly understood it. So that was the rule of the square and then opposition, the two main things in endgames, alright? Now we'll learn about one more technique. It's called flanking, and it basically just has to do with opposition. It's kind of similar, but oh, what is this?
A nice even game.
Here. Okay, so with flanking, what happens is you have. Let me move this. Let me just set up a position like this. Okay, so flanking is something that has to do with opposition. It combines opposition to allow you to promote a pawn, alright? And it's basically, so when you use opposition and flanking in tandem, then you should be able to promote one of your pawns into a queen, alright? So this is basically like the poster like puzzle for like what happens in pawn endgames. So right now it's white to move, and he has one extra pawn, right? And he is trying to turn this pawn into a queen, alright? And after he turns the pawn into a queen, then it's easier to checkmate, right? So now white to play, alright? And now obviously you guys probably don't know how to do this from the start, but I'm gonna give you a few like rules to look for, alright? And then you should be able to figure it out from there, okay? So the first thing you want to do is locate the square where your pawn is going to turn into a queen. So where is the pawn going to turn into a queen? Isa?
E7. Wait, no, E8.
Yeah, E8, right? So on E8, when the pawn reaches E8, the other end of the board, then it can turn into a queen, right? So that's where the pawn turns into a queen. But notice the black king is covering that square. So we need to take control of that square and then push our pawn up, right? And that's where our king comes into the plan, alright? So now we know that the queening square is on E8. Now next we need to look for any way that we can use opposition, okay? So do you guys see a way for white to use an opposition right here? Jacob?
What did you say?
So do you see a way for white to put his king into opposition with the opponent's king right here?
No.
No? Okay, alright. How about let's go on to how about Vishnu? Do you have an idea?
White king to e6.
Nice, yeah. So actually, first of all, I don't think I explained this very clearly, but basically what I mean by put your king into opposition is the two kings are apart like this, alright? So now if white moves his king and then they're now facing off each other, then that means that white has the opposition. He has the opposition. And if black is the one that just moved into the opposition, so for example, like let's say here. So the black moved into directly facing off with the opponent's king. That means black has the opposition, alright? So actually, before we get into this, let me just like open up a new position with like just showing that, because I think that's actually pretty important. So in this case, if white is the one to move to e4, that means that he has the opposition, because he's the one that moved his king into the square where now the two kings are facing off, right? And now let's say if it was like this, now black moves to king e7, and now he is now the two kings are directly facing off each other, right? That means that black has the opposition, alright? Now I'll give you a few examples, alright? And you guys tell me if white has the opposition or if black has the opposition, okay? And it should be pretty simple. It's basically whoever just moved last, they're the ones who have the opposition, okay? So, yeah, does anyone want to go ahead? Who has the opposition in this case? Isa?
White.
Well, remember, so the person that has the opposition is the person who just played. So the person who just played into opposition, it was the person that just played is black, right? So black moved his king into opposition. That means he has the opposition, okay? Alright, what about now? Who has the opposition? Who moved their king so that they're directly facing off against each other? Viksha?
White.
Yeah, exactly. Alright, and how about here? Adrian?
White.
Yeah, white again, right? How about now? Who has the who played into opposition? Jacob?
A black.
Yeah, black, right? Because black just played his king and took the opposition. Okay. How about now? Who has the opposition? Vishnu?
White has the opposition.
Yeah, so I think you guys basically get the gist of it, right? So whoever just played the move, so the two kings are directly facing off against each other, they're the ones who have the opposition, alright? And why is it important to get the opposition or to have the opposition? So basically, the person who plays into opposition, so now just remember the example. The two kings, there's like a wall in front of each other, right? The person who plays into opposition, they don't have to move their king right now. But the other person, their king can't move forward this move. He has to move to the side or back, right? Oh, okay, so the king has to move to the side or back. So that means that the opponent's king, they can't move forward for one move. And that's really important. That time that you get by saving one square, or like saving one move where your king can just keep moving forward is really important, right? So let's say in this example, black has the opposition, right? So that means that it's white's king's turn to move. That means that the white king, he can't move forward right now. He has to move to the side or back. Let's say the king moves to the side. Now the black king, okay, the black king can move forward still, right? He didn't have to waste a move by moving to the side. He could just use his time efficiently and move his king forward still, alright? Does everybody understand that? Any questions? Alright, so, yeah, so basically, like in summary, if like you got anything out of that, basically, if you get into opposition, then your opponent has to waste time by moving his king to the side. He can't move forward, alright? And that's really useful. And the reason that's useful, you might be wondering, is because of these endgames. This endgame here, where you have an extra pawn. Jacob, do you have a question?
No.
Okay, yeah. Alright, so I think this is the exact position, right? And Vishnu just said, for white to get the opposition, he moves his king to e6. Now, what does that mean? White just got the opposition. That means that all three of these squares are controlled, right? It means black's king can't move forward. He has to move to the side. Usually the black king would be able to move backward, but he's on the last rank, right? So that means he can't move backward. He has to move to the side. So where do you guys want the black king to go? D8 or F8? Doesn't really matter.
D8.
D8? Okay, alright. So let's say the black king goes to D8. Alright, now here is where the technique of flanking comes in, okay? And you guys kind of already know it basically. So notice before that all the two kings are controlling the same three squares in front of them, right? And what are these three squares that the both kings are controlling? Can anybody name them? Isa?
D7, E7, and F7.
Nice, yeah. So both kings are controlling D7, E7, and F7. But now it's black's turn to play, and he just played king D8. Now the white king is controlling the same three squares, D7, E7, and F7. But the black king is controlling E7, D7, and C7, this square. But that means that the black king is not controlling F7 anymore, right? So now the two blue squares are the two squares that the kings have to themselves, basically, right? So both these kings have a square to themselves. So now next move, both of them can move forward. So in this case, what flanking is when after your opponent moves to one side, let's say in this case our opponent's king moved to D8, we can use the hole in the wall that the opponent's king left. I think that's the analogy I gave, right? So right now, both the kings, there's a wall in front of them. When the black king moves to D8, he leaves a hole in the wall on F7. And now white can use that hole and put his king there. By doing that, he didn't waste time, right? The white king continued to move forward. So let's just look at the same example, except what if the black king moved to F8 instead of D8? Now, where is the hole in the wall? Which square can white move to, the white king move to that black isn't controlling? Vishnu?
The white king can move to D7.
Exactly. So remember, back here, both kings are controlling the same three squares, D7, E7, F7. But now when the black king moves to F8, that means that he's now controlling E7, F7, and G7, this square on G7. But that means that the white king can go to this square on D7. The black king left a hole in the wall, and because of that, he can fill the hole. And this technique of getting the opposition and then forcing your opponent's king to move to the side and then filling the hole in the wall, that's essentially what flanking is. Alright, and after this, looks like we're about to run out of time, so I won't get to explain what the full technique of flanking is, but basically by moving to the side, now you basically are protecting all three of the squares that your pawn is going to move to, right? Your pawn's going to move to e6, then e7, then e8. Now your king is able to defend all three of these squares at the same time. Before, look here, the king is stopping the pawn from moving, and he's only protecting e7 and e6, right? The king has no authority over the e8 square, because black is guarding e8. But now, by using this flanking technique, now white is guarding all three of these squares. So the white pawn can just keep moving forward. It's basically escorting our pawn forward, right? So don't worry if you have any questions about this last part I just said. I'll explain a lot more about this next Wednesday, alright? But for now, I think our next class will be Monday, October 21st, alright? And that will be an in-person class at the NSC library at 5 p.m., alright? So if you guys have any questions, you can stay on a little and then ask. But if not, then I will see you guys next Monday, alright? Bye.
Bye.
Bye.